hard work they put in.
Exactly. And on that, I think it's time to start for me. I need my time, I guess. So
that's right.
Let me first start out with, well, you might have seen this before in previous sessions. So to some, this isn't new, but please consider donating via the donate page we've set up. So we can all help out in supporting the Solidarity Response Fund and the World's Health Organization. So if you've got something to spare, please share there as well. We've also set up a break room or chill out lounge. Please do not share the link outside of the attendees, but this is something you can use to have a chat with other Sitecore-minded people. Doesn't necessarily have to be about one of the sessions or this session. So just for you to know. And I think it's time to go to the data privacy topic. I will talk about with you this upcoming hour. As we all know, data security is quite a hot topic, and I don't want to make this a GDPR session, but what I do notice is that it's very difficult to get a rough understanding of what happens in Sitecore and what you need to store, what is stored where, and to get really a good understanding of the data your site gathers and how to control that, but also how to clean up that. Well, I'm going to switch my audio now, so see if this works, because I got a little snippet from someone else who want to help me out here.
Crazy, right? Sites store stuff up, y'all. No automatic disposal. It's a mess. But hey, don't even worry about it.
Because, well, we've got the right to be forgotten, so that solves a lot of, well, questions we have and is a solution to a lot of our issues in terms of the GDPR, but I think neuralizing on marketers shouldn't be a manual process, as it really is right now. You can use the right to be forgotten, but you have to push the button like Jay did in this small fragment. And then there's another misconception that cookie lifetime helps you out here. Cookie lifetime actually doesn't do anything for your data persistence in Sitecore. So cookie expiration is not the same as data retention. And these are the reasons I decided to have a chat with you about this topic, because the database can sometimes be a data maze. Well, you don't know what data is stored where and for how long. So the motivation for this talk is I've seen some incorrect assumptions on data retentions in Sitecore or in general. I don't think there's a best practice or a proven example on how to deal with this in the Sitecore platform. I even encountered some unclear or even incorrect documentation. And well, maybe the biggest motivation for me is that the lack of clarity on what happens with the data inhibits some people or some organizations from actually using XDB or using XDB full out. So to get one thing clear, if you don't act, all the data and thus also the personal data will be stored in your database indefinitely. And obviously that's not what we want. So our challenge is that there's no automatic disposal of personal data out of the box. Also that we have to clean up the data per entry, compliant with your privacy policy, and I'll get to that later, what I mean with that. Then there's also different types of consent and retention periods, because if you if you get a Sitecore cookie and just visit the website, there's some consent and some retention period going on there. But if you then fill out a form for a specific campaign or event, you could have a separate retention period. And the right to be forgotten simply doesn't cover all the data in your Sitecore installation or implementation. So first, we need to get a good understanding of the tracker and the database and where our data lives. Because we're going to extend it, we need to know what happens. I'm not going to explain this in detail, so I've included the link to the documentation where this is covered. And there's just a few things that you have to keep in mind. First of all, when you're visiting the website for the first time, you will be followed by the tracker, and the data is not stored within the database. This happens on session end. Most of you probably already know this, but the tracker and XConnect have a different model in classes and in names and in IDs. That's something you have to keep in mind. And secondly, where the tracker stores everything in the session, XConnect stores things in the database. And to make it a little bit more complex, it's not one database, it's like a lot of databases where these 8 are maybe the most usual, typical ones that you store your data in, and the session is stored or not stored in, but connected via the cookie, and by just deleting the cookie or deleting the connection with the cookie, the data still resides in your database. So I got the desire to come up with what I call a sliding expiration. And a sliding expiration for me is a system where every record in my database automatically expires after a certain amount of time, completely automatically. And that's why I have this background image of all the clocks running in same or in different at different times, because you need to have an idea of your data as having different retention periods per record. So we've got some ways to clean up the data, and there's been solutions to this already, to my desire to build some sliding expiration. Obviously, you can do it yourself and execute the right to be forgotten from code, although that's manual. You can do it from the experience profile dashboard. 9.2 has a nice anonymized, or version 9 has a nice anonymized feature, but you have to do it manually from a contact for each contact separately. And then you have the analytics database manager. It's one of the modules on the marketplace, and it's been around for ages, and it's adopted to still work with Sitecore 9, but it does not yet, which is a logical thing, I think, use the power of the new features you have in Sitecore. And also you can only run this manually, and you have to pick a cutoff date and then delete all records. But all of these steps are not automatic, and they all require manual intervention. So what do we need to do? Well, first of all, realize that cookie lifetime is not equal to PII disposal. So if your privacy policy says we'll store your data for 2 years, setting the cookie lifetime to 2 years only takes care of the connection with the data, but the data will still be there. So what we need to do is we have to execute the right to be forgotten after the consent expiration. And I think it should run automatically after the last interaction. And I also want some flexibility to use this feature in different scenarios. And when you dive into the technical requirements of it, like I do want a minimal, some minimal customizations or less custom code. I want to stay close to Sitecore and utilize its capabilities that it has nowadays. And I want reusability for marketers. This obviously points to one thing and one thing only, and that is a marketing plan. Thing is, we do not yet have such features out of the box, so we're going to create it. So I want to demonstrate you how I've built sliding expiration, creating a new custom marketing action to do so. Okay, so it would be great if we can execute the right to be forgotten in an automation plan, but there's no activity type for that. We do not have a marketing action that
Hey Rob, it's paused. We can't hear you because I think you need to switch the source.
Yeah, I did, so you can hear me now, and I saw that it's paused. Did you hear the first few sentences? Does it
Yes,
work? Okay,
yes, it.
so I'm going to just continue.
Yeah, I
Give
think
me a
if you
sec.
turn off your video and then play it, I think the bandwidth seems to be fine.
Yeah, that was what I was trying, but then it automatically paused, so I'm going to continue. That executes the right to be forgotten. So we need to create a custom activity type for that. There's an excellent series of blog posts on how to do this, written by Alexei Vasalovic, and I will share the link to that blog series at the end of my presentation. I'm not going to explain how marketing automation plans work. I'm kind of assuming you know how they work, and I'm going to dive straight into building a custom activity type. The first thing you need to do is you have to create an NPM project and a package JSON, because we need to build an Angular app for this. There are a few things you have to keep in mind, and that is that you need to point to be able to build the actual plugin, and we're going to create an Angular. You have to point to the marketing automation core in your local Sitecore deployment. So you need to configure this folder and update this this reference. And then we're going to define a plugin class, and we're using TypeScript for that. This is the plugin class, and there's a few things you can see. We need to refer to a Sitecore item that defines the custom activity type. I will show that in a minute. And we're going to name it, and we're going to also define an editor component. Please note that this is not spelled correctly, but that's actually correct because that's also how it is named in Sitecore. So do not correct that, because your solution won't work. So we're going to build a module, and the module is named anonymize contact, because that's the only thing we're going to do. We're going to anonymize a certain contact. So after you define the activity, which is this one, and the editor component, we're going to define the actual activity item. It is derived from a single item, because there's actually just a single path. There's no decision paths, yes or no, or different routes. There's one outgoing path. You just erase it and then go through with your marketing automation plan. So a single item applies here. And we are also going to set is defined to true. Is defined tells the editor if the activity type is ready and completely defined. And although we do not have any parameters, we still need to define the component, which in our case is just displaying the name of our module. There's no extra configuration in here. And lastly, we need to define the AOT JSON configuration, which also points to the module in here. And I have the module class in here as well, with the declaration of the component. So that's actually a little bit of Angular, which we're going to build with Webpack. As you can see here, this is where we have created the client application, but this is not the location where it is running in Sitecore. There's actually a path, Sitecore shell client applications, marketing automation plugins, and we need to put it here. But we're going to build it using Webpack. So we have a Webpack config, and you see that the path is defined here, and we build it into here. I myself included a small PowerShell script which runs at build time and puts it in the right folder. And you can see I've excluded it from Git by putting this in the git ignore and putting it there at build time, and it's included in the solution with a wildcard, so it's automatically being deployed as a resource. And that's about it, what we need to do. It's some very simple steps. And actually the plugin configuration, which you can see right here, there's a marketing automation plugin descriptor, and we point to the path we've created the plugin in with the correct file name. And that's basically everything you need to do to let Sitecore know that there's a plugin running and that the script is over there. And then for the backend code, we're going to create a class that's anonymized contact. And we actually have only one line of real code, and that is execute the right to be forgotten on the contact from the current context. We submit this, and then we return a new success move, which tells the marketing automation plan to move to the next step. Obviously, when something goes wrong, we return a failure, and then the marketing automation plan will freeze and will not continue to run. And this is actually very clean because it's only this one single line of code that's been executed, and the when and how it's been executed is completely arranged by the marketing automation plan. So now we're going to go to the Sitecore content editor to show you that in the system folder and then settings, in analytics, marketing automation activity types, we've created a new item, anonymized contact. And you see this is the ID that we're using in the plugin to point to, and it has to match this item. Furthermore, we're going to give it a name, an icon, and very important, the assembly type of the class we've created in here to be executed when the code runs. And it is part of the classification marketing actions. And that's all we need to do. There's only one thing left, and that is we also need to deploy this to the XConnect project. So I'm to go to the XConnect project in the Habitat solution. And you can see right here that in the app data is a jobs continuous automation engine. And within the app data, there's again some subfolders. We have two things we need to put in there. In the automation engine itself, we need a compile DLL. I don't really like putting it in here as a hard-coded reference to the build code, but for ease of the demo, I'm just going to put it in here. It would be even nicer if you just make it a part of your deployment script. And within the app data config cycle marketing automation folder, we need to register the activity type. And you can see here that we have defined our assembly type, and again the same ID of the Sitecore item. And these are the steps we need to take to build a custom activity type. And now comes the magic, because if we now go to an automation plan and we create a new one for this, we have the anonymized contact. And I can just put it in here. And whenever this marketing automation plan runs, at this step, my contact will be anonymized. And as you can see, it immediately jumps to the defined state. And if I would put in another one like this, I still need to configure stuff, and it's not defined, so it's not fully finished. And that's what I did by, let me show you with the activity type, just put it on is defined right away. So you don't need to configure anything. There's no parameters here, so the editor component is quite easy. And now we need to have an entry for that plan. So we're going to configure some specific rules in the rule set editor for the automation plan to get triggered. And we're going to do that by searching for interacted, because what we want for sliding expiration is that when a contact hasn't interacted with your platform for a certain amount of time, you're going to dispose the data. The one that fits this best is actually the number of times someone has interacted in a certain amount of time. So I'm going to say when the number of times the contact has interacted on any channel in the past, and now you can say like 2 years, for example. So I will set this to 2 years is equal to 0. So if someone has interacted 0 times in 2 years, I want to dispose the data. And there's only one thing I can add. I want to make sure that the contact is known, because for the profile that isn't identified, I'm not really storing any data. So I'm going to do it like this. And this is all. Let me apply. And this is all. Now we have a very simple and easy to use marketing automation plan that will automatically clean up the data, and it runs right away, and it does my cleanup continuously, and I never have to worry there's any data of people that stop interacting with me, and I can make this compliant with my privacy policy. And the great thing is I can also use this step at the end of, let's say, if I have an email unsubscribe button or a specific campaign and I will need to use this, I can put it in the automation plan as well. I don't have to stick to only this plan. I can reuse the anonymized contact if someone requires to get anonymized for any reason. So that's it. That's the end of the first demo, and I think it's a very, very elegant solution. I've also created, I'm going to throw this away. I've also created a template for this. This is the sliding XDB contact expiration, and you can use that yourself as a starting point. I've configured it exactly the same, so you can create a new plan off of this template. Okay, so that was the first demo. I want to add one thing, and that is, if you want the right to be forgotten to actually work perfectly well with any customizations you might do, don't forget to add the property PII sensitive to any facet or facet property you're going to create, and then it will automatically be covered by the right to be forgotten. I've created an installable Sitecore package of this, and it's on my GitHub. I have a repository called Data Privacy, and it includes both the whole copy of my Habitat demo I have used for this, because my demo is built as an example on Habitat 9.2, but it actually works and is tested on 9.1 and higher. And my module includes the custom activity type I've shown you, and also the marketing automation template. So you can use this, install it in your environment, and you don't have to do any coding, and it automatically works. And you can configure the retention period, obviously, to your likings. So let's get on to the next subject, because I want to track some more data, and I will want to spend some extra time on the Sitecore forms, and I'll explain you why. Because, well, do we have covered everything with the package I've written? Well, obviously the answer will be no, but let's dive into that. And here's all the non-content databases of a typical Sitecore installation. Mind that Cortex and the Universal Tracker do also store some personal data, but that is only temporarily. And that this is given the default behavior. So I'm assuming you're not customizing, adding stuff where Sitecore didn't intend it to do it. But if you look at a typical installation, these databases I've marked here will store personal data. It's a collection database with your profiles. It's the forms database with the form entries, and EXM with the email addresses. All the other databases only store tasks and references to items, aggregated data, and actually not the personal data itself. So we don't have to worry about these anymore. And then when you execute the write to be forgotten, that actually takes care of the collection database in EXM. So when you run the execute writes to be forgotten or install my my Sitecore package I've shared, then you're good on these two databases. But as you can see, we might have an issue here, because forms database is actually the only one that is not covered out of the box, and you have to take care of this yourself. I also should say that you don't actually need to store data in forms. If you look at the Habitat demo, it doesn't do so. It only identifies in the contact and returns you to the redirect page. Redirects you to the thank you page, but that is actually, well, it doesn't do anything for the user. So normally you would email the outcome or you would send it to an API. But if you need to also store it in Sitecore, you can do that with the save data submit action. Then it will be stored in the forms database, and you have to take care of it yourself. I should also say that Sitecore 9.3 allows you to delete form data, but it only gives you two options: delete the complete list of a single form, or delete records based on a date range. But that actually doesn't help me out, because everyone filled in the form at a different moment in time. So if you have a certain retention period on your campaign, it's different for each record. So we can't use that. And also, there's actually no link between XDB and your contact and the form entry. So I went looking in the documentation, and I found this, and I think it's perfect, because it says that the reporting database stores which entries been made by which user, and this creates your link. So Sitecore advises you in the documentation that this is an example or a way to clean up the data. The thing is that you would still have to go in SQL and do some custom stuff, but at least that's awesome, because, well, it's the missing link, and it's the missing piece of the puzzle, if it would be true. Because, well, Sitecore doesn't store the form entry ID in the reporting database, only the form ID. So you can't actually tell who filled in what entry, but only which form, and that doesn't help us out here. So I was kind of like, you can imagine that. So I had to fix it myself, and yes, I've reported this, what I think is a documentation error, and then got to finding a solution. And well, forms data cannot be accessed via the Sitecore IPA like you would normally do in C#, deleting or creating Sitecore items. So we need SQL to implement this functionality. I've also decompiled the experience forms assembly and found there's a SQL form data provider but actually stop using it because it's not ideal to extend. I will tell you why in my demo. So let's have a look at the code and the solution I've created to get around the issues of not having automatic disposal and not having a link with your contact. Okay, so to be able to erase form submissions data when we execute the right to be forgotten, I have created a new Helix feature, which is called Forms Extension. And it includes a custom activity type, and I'm not going to show you how that works as I've done in the previous demo, but I'm just going to point out which specific things are needed to do to make this work. And the first of all is that we have a custom form save action. I will show you in Sitecore that I'm in the form editor right now. And normally I have a save data action, which saves the data into the database. To be clear, if you don't use this step at all, the data will not be saved. And you do not have any issues at all in cleaning out the database, obviously. But if you do want to save the data, you need to establish a link between the contact and the form entry. And as I go into the forms database, you will see that each form entry has an ID, and it has a form item ID, which is a reference to the form. But if you go to the form metrics table in the reporting database, you will find that actually a contact is matched to a form ID and not to a form entry. So I cannot see which entry is yours. So to be able to do that, I have decided to, upon a save action, add an extra field in the database. And you can see the result right here in the table of the experience forms database. I have an extra field called XDB tracker with the ID of that. And I have done this by creating a custom save data submit action, which I have inherited from save data and extended with two new methods, or actually with one new method, and I've overridden the save posted data. The new method creates a new text field, which is kind of a hidden field. And what it does for the tracker field name, I will save the tracker current contact ID. And I have overridden save post data. And if there are any fields, posted fields in the submit action, I just add one more and save the form. To be able to do this, you also need to create a Sitecore item within the system folder and point to the right type. And when you do so, you get this new submit action, and upon submitting, regardless of the fields you use in here, there's always one extra field added that is not visible to the user, and it stores the XDB tracker ID. Now we have that, we can empty the form data from the database. I have done that with what I call a data management service, and it's just a class that I have defined as within XConnect a custom marketing automation service. You need to configure one pointing to your type to be able to run this within a marketing automation activity. If I go to that, what you see here is based upon the contact ID I get, I will just execute a very simple query that deletes all entries that contain the XDB tracker field with the given value. Initially, when decompiling the experience forms assemblies, I found that there is a SQL form data provider that Sitecore uses to interact with the database, and I think it's way nicer to use that one to extend to do any to run any queries against the database. But upon doing so, I found that you need to include a whole lot of additional assemblies to your XConnect deployment, which is not something you would want to do. It's not only the experience forms, but also the Sitecore kernel and some additional assemblies. So I didn't want that, so I stick to the SQL client here. When I go to the activity implementation, I see that when I invoke this, I get the tracker ID field name, and then I get the field ID of the current contact. And this is something you have to keep in mind, that as you see, we have used the contact ID of the tracker, and it would seem a logical thing to go in the current context, find the contact, and then the ID, and then its value. And although this is named contact ID, in a way, it's the ID of the current contact in your context when you're performing a marketing automation plan on this contact, which looks the same like the contact ID you saved when you save the form entry, but it's actually not the same, because when an anonymous contact hits your website and fills in a form, a tracker ID is generated, and that's the only ID you have at this very moment. So I get the contact ID of the tracker, but upon session end, a new contact will be created, a new contact ID will be generated, and that is actually this one. And the original contact ID of the tracker will be moved to another identifier in the identifier collection with the identifier XDB tracker. Well, that's the name of your identifier. You actually have multiple identifiers. If you want to look up how this works, there's some good info on the Sitecore docs website. I will include a link to this page as well. It explains very well what happens that you first get this ID and what happens when you visit the website again. But to sum up, we need the tracker ID, and we get that from the collection, so this won't work. Okay, so I get the tracker ID, and then I execute delete form entries, which is the method I've shown you, this one, and it clears out my database. That is what we need to do to run this. And when you go to the marketing automation plan and you perform the same steps as in the previous demo, you will end up with a new marketing action, which is erase form submissions. And when I add this to my marketing automation plan, you will see that I use the same rule to enter this plan as in the last demo, only I've set the time to 5 minutes instead of 2 years, which is a little bit more convenient for testing purposes. And when someone didn't interact with my website for 5 minutes, this will run, and it will first erase any form submission that is linked to my contact, and then it will anonymize the contact and perform the right to be forgotten. Be sure to first erase the form submissions, because if you first execute the right to be forgotten, the tracker ID will be gone and you lose your link with the form entries in the table. So this is my way of adding some extra functionality to easily erase any form data that is older than a given amount of time to comply with my privacy policy. And I think the amount of custom code is very low, and it easily shows to you that you can extend the marketing automation plan with useful actions that will help you clean out your database. Yes, and because this is a topic about data security, and I should also mention that you have to enable transparent data encryption when you run on premises. On Azure SQL, it is automatically enabled, but if you're running on premises, you should do it yourself. So be sure to do that as well to make sure your data in the forms database is as secure as possible. Obviously, I've also created a package for that. So there's another module on my GitHub with all the stuff from the demo. And again, within the Habitat demo project, it is included as code, but it's also an installable Sitecore module. There's a custom activity type in it. Also, the custom save action you saw to be able to link the data in the forms database to your contact. And also this works from 1.9.1 and higher. I should also point out that where the other module is actually, I think, the best and most elegant solution, and you can use it right away. I think you should see this more as an example, because I can imagine that there's other identifiers you want to use for linking the data to your contact. Maybe you would want to use your email address. Obviously, that would work perfectly fine as well, but you need to change the code. Or maybe you want just to use other triggers, like you want to have a separate plan to trigger deleting forms data if you, for example, have a campaign or you want to distinguish different retention periods. So use this to extend to your likings, but I think it at least solves one of the things that normally the right to be forgotten does not cover. So one small last demo of a few minutes that shows you how this actually works on the website of Habitat. Now I'm going to demonstrate how the marketing automation plan works and the fact that it really works. So I'm going to create a new marketing plan based off the template that is included in my my Sitecore module, and I'm going to add the erase form submissions step. This is set to 2 years by default. I'm going to change that into 5 minutes. Apply, save, and sliding expiration. Okay, save. I'm going to start it, and it has been activated. So now we are going to visit the website. And I'm going to fill in the contact form. And to make this easier to follow, I have cleared out the form entry database, so there's nothing in it yet. I will save this. That means I am now identified. I'm going to click around on the website for a bit.
Guys,
get some goals, do some stuff. And when I now go to the database, I see that I have a form entry and the data I have entered is saved together with my XDB tracker ID. If I go to the experience profile and search for my name, I will find my profile. That's the one I entered just a few seconds ago. And when I click on report view, there's still nothing because we're still within the first 5 minutes after my last interaction. So let's close and end my session and wait for a bit. So it's been at least 5 minutes. So let's see what happened with the profile. Here's my name. And when I refresh it, you can see that everything is empty right now, but the events and the goals, like the Mark Chase team member visit I did, are still in the profile. When I take a look at the report view now, you can see that there's one contact that went through the marketing automation plan. And when I take a look at the database and I execute this query again, you can see that it is now completely empty again. So my automation plan worked as designed. So to close this up, I'm already past my 45 minutes, I see. I want to get to the conclusion that you shouldn't rely on your cookie lifetime to think you're covered in data retention, because your cookie lifetime doesn't equal your PII storage. And I think it's important to, if you customize, to stay close to Sitecore and use its existing functionality and automate whatever you can. I think the marketing automation plan you see on the right, but obviously you can use the same steps in more complex plans too. But it's a very elegant way to help out your marketers to be able to do not worry about data retention. And you can download and use my packages or use my Habitat example code on my repository on GitHub, and that is called data privacy. I have some interesting links for you. Obviously, it will be hard to get them from here, but this presentation will be shared and the slide deck will be shared. Here you can see how to do some cleanup, some interesting pages on the Sitecore docs on data retention, and also a blog on the custom activities and the custom fields I have referenced in my talk. And that would end my talk. And if there are any questions, we have a few minutes left, so please let me know.
Yep, we have a couple of questions, Rob. So the first question is, do you have to have the identity card save action on your form for the custom submit action to work as intended?
For the forms, yes, you do, because well, you could just delete all the data, or you just create your own query to delete entries that are older than a certain amount of time. But if you want to really connect it with when you execute the right to be forgotten, you need to establish a link between those. Yes.
Right. So the next question is, just like with your contact data, Forms DB can store non-PII sensitive data too. Did you find this page useful? No. Can we mark these fields somehow and delete only sensitive fields of a submission, not all of them?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, well, you have to fully custom create this. I didn't really think of it because most of the times, you know, form entries is temporary data, or like data of a certain campaign, or you request the contact with the company or so. Most of the time, it isn't really data that you want to store for a long period in time. So I would say it is better to when you have some data you want to store for a longer period in time without deleting it or with deleting it SPI, just move it over to a facet. On safe, you can do so you can move the data from your forms database to a facet, and then you can handle it from there.
Awesome. Any more questions, guys? Please ask in the questions panel. Those are the only two questions we had. Like Rob mentioned, we will share the slide deck, so you will have access to all the long URLs in the slide deck.
Yep.
I haven't seen any coming through, Rob. If they do, we'll try to pass them over. Thank you so much for your time. Awesome
And
presentation.
Thank you. And you can always reach out to me on Slack or Twitter, and I will answer you right there. Okay.
Will do.
Thanks for the opportunity, and see you around.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
All right. So we have how much? 2,852 euros raised, which is awesome, which means people are getting in and donating as much as they can, which we truly appreciate. Like we said, every little bit counts. Anything you can afford to donate, no matter how small it is, please do go ahead and donate to the COVID-19 Solidarity Fund. So all the healthcare workers can be taken care of. They're, of course, taking the brunt of this and taking care of sick patients. All right. And then also, as a reminder, we do have a breakout room, which is on Zoom. Do not share this slide on any public channels because we don't want intruders. But get on there, speak to other people about sessions, about Sitecore in general. Just, we thought it would be nice to have a break room where people can just hang out while they're listening to the actual conference going on. Maybe they have some thoughts. So if no one's talking, shouldn't stop you from jumping in and speaking your mind and getting into conversations.
Or if they want to watch and watch the presentations and want to join the Zoom, I think they will probably have a Sitecore lunch tomorrow for the North American sessions. You can always join those, discuss what they've been learning, what they found interesting, what they're going to be playing with afterwards. Hopefully it's a weekend of hacking coming up with things that people have been learning, and from all the there's been a lot of great presentations so far.
Yep. So coming up is Sitecore Commerce Marketing Features Under the Hood by Saurabh. So his presentation would start in about 7 minutes. So Saurabh, if you're on, please do turn on your webcam, talk to us, and then hopefully I'll give you the presenter's mode in a couple of minutes. There you are. We can't hear you, but we can see you for sure.
Yeah, you can hear me now.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm always with the beard in the SUGCON, to be honest. So impact of staying indoors.
Yeah. How's everything going?
Good. As good as it can be, given the isolation and all those things happening. How are things with you guys? It's been a great event. I joined at the first session. It's been a great event through the day.
Yeah, so far it's going well. So we're more than halfway through. The final stretch is coming up, right? So so far everything's going on time, and we're having to keep it on time, which is great. Good presentations. Looking forward to sharing all of these with everyone. Nice.
Yeah, sessions have been well timed, I think. Everyone's been running pretty well on time. Been some good questions, things coming through as well.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Akshay and Mike need to do a little.
That's all you're gonna get.
It'll help you with your stretching, Mike, from all your working out.
Huh?
It'll help with your stretching from all the working out. Help keep you flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Rob Riley says, you guys are doing awesome. Hope you had some sleep. Yes, thank you. We've been, thankfully for all the organizers, we've been able to switch on and off from time to time. So thanks to all the presenters and everyone watching. I know some people have been watching for a long time. And then all the organizers for taking on the responsibility.
Yeah, I just want to say it again. This could not happen without the attendees. Thank you for joining. And donate, please donate. This goes to the people on the front lines who are fighting the battle. Every penny helps. Doesn't matter what it is. Please, let's all do our part and try to battle this together as one community.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm making you the presenter.
Great.